Immortal Alchemist of Rome Part 2. Chapter 10, The Mistress of Smoke. Location, Magnus' hidden lab, beneath Rome, 2:17 a.m. The stolen fragment pulsed faintly on the worktable, cradled in a glass containment dome, surrounded by shielding runes etched in molten silver. Magnus hadn't taken his eyes off it for an hour. Eva stood nearby, arms crossed, her skin still tingling from the shock pulse of the nullstone blast she'd triggered back at the cult gala. The burns on her ribs were healing too fast. Too unnaturally fast. Magnus ran a scanner over the fragment. The light turned red. Again. Red. Again. Red. What does that mean? Eva asked. Magnus didn't answer. He walked away from the table, pulled down an ancient scroll, and rolled it across the workbench. Eva moved closer and saw the title. Transmutatio Secunda, the Smoke Doctrine. Magnus exhaled slowly. They didn't just find the stone. They evolved it. Rome, 64 AD. Kasia stood in the center of the temple fire, gold flames dancing across her hands. Her eyes were bloodshot, her voice trembling. They won't stop, she told Magnus. Not Nero. Not Lucian. You have to destroy it. I can't, he said. Kasia gripped his wrist and shoved something into his palm. A scroll. Burned. Sealed with black wax. Then hide it where even gods can't reach. She kissed him once, desperate, final. Then turned, walked into the smoke, and was gone. Eva read the scroll as Magnus translated aloud. It was a theory, written by a rogue alchemist from Alexandria. A way to convert the Philosopher's stone into a living seed that could bond with human biology, not just preserve it. Magnus' voice was grave. They're not making more of the stone. They're growing it. Inside people. Eva's breath caught. They're using hosts? He nodded. That's why Antaros spoke. Why he remembered your name. He wasn't just mutated, he was merged. Which means, Eva started. Magnus finished the thought. The next version will remember everything you do. It will be you. Lights flashed red. Someone had breached the outer gate. Magnus activated the view screen. For a second, static. Then a face appeared. Kasia. Or something wearing her face. Magnus and Eva moved through the corridors of the catacombs where the breach originated. It was the only other place in the world Magnus had hidden a shard of the stone. Why would Kasia be alive? Eva whispered. She wouldn't, Magnus said flatly. She died in the fire. Then what the hell was that? They turned a corner and stopped cold. There she stood. Kasia. Perfect. Unaged. Unburned. Wearing the same white cloak from the night the temple fell. Magnus' voice cracked. Kasia? She smiled. I told you I'd come back. The fire never really took me. Eva stepped in front of him. Back off. I swear. Kasia held up her hand. Gold fire crackled across her fingers. But her expression, it wasn't violent. It was mournful. I didn't come to fight, she said softly. I came to warn you. Magnus froze. Warn us. Kasia stepped closer. Lucian doesn't just want ascension. He wants replacement. Eva's eyes narrowed. Replacement of what? Of death. Of choice. Of identity. Kasia's voice turned bitter. He thinks that if we all become vessels, memory will be the only currency. That the self can be overwritten. Reused. Controlled. Eva took a slow step forward. And what are you? Kasia looked down at her hands. I'm not sure anymore. Magnus looked broken. You were the one who told me the stone wasn't meant to be alive, he whispered. You begged me to destroy it. Kasia met his gaze. And now I'm proof of what happens when we don't. Eva sat alone, watching the stone fragment pulse in its glass dome. Kasia was gone. Just gone. No trace. No scent. Not even residual heat. Like she'd never been there. Magnus stood at the window, staring into the dark. She still remembered you, Eva said quietly. That's what scared me the most, he replied. Lucian stood before 6 new subjects, each in a suspended tank. Their bodies twitched. Their eyes were closed. In the center was a girl. Small. Burned. But alive. Lucian stroked the glass gently. She'll remember what the fire took, he whispered. And this time, she'll want it back. Chapter 11, The Inferno Below. Location, Basilica of St. Marcellus, 6:39 p.m. Underneath the Vatican sector. By day, it was just another half-visited relic of old Rome. Quiet. Sacred. Ignored by tourists. But deep beneath the chapel's cracked mosaics and faded icons, Magnus had hidden something even the church didn't know about. Or so he thought. Now the reliquary was gone. Eva stepped through the broken stone vaults first, her flashlight sweeping across claw marks etched into marble, melted hinges, and a floor blackened by unnatural heat. She crouched near the remains of a shattered pedestal. Whatever they took, she said, it was inside this box. Magnus stepped forward, face grim. Not a box, he murmured. A prism. One of only 3 in the world that could contain a living seed of the stone. Eva turned sharply. You said you destroyed all of them. I said I tried. She stared at him. You lied. I forgot, he said simply. That's worse. Egypt, 1555 AD. A scorched temple. Bodies frozen in gold. And Magnus kneeling beside an obsidian prism containing something that pulsed like a heartbeat. You were supposed to die with me, he whispered to it. But he didn't destroy it. He buried it beneath Rome, deep in the forgotten catacombs. He told no one. Eva stood, staring at the fractured casing. Who else knew about this? No one, Magnus said. Then how did Lucian find it? A voice echoed from the corridor behind them. Because you weren't the only one who survived Egypt. A figure emerged from the shadows, hooded, tall, with a golden chain around his neck and a bronze-tipped staff in one hand. His face was tattooed with alchemical sigils, each one pulsing faintly under the torchlight. Magnus stepped forward, shock in his voice. Ezen? Eva raised her gun. Who the hell is that? My former apprentice, Magnus said coldly. And the first man I ever betrayed. Ezen grinned, revealing teeth like cracked ivory. You left me in the sands. You took the stone and ran. I walked for 2 months through a desert of death, and found something greater than forgiveness. He raised the staff. The walls shuddered. The temperature spiked. And then the floor opened. Magnus and Eva fell, landing in a deeper chamber, a tomb built with no known architectural style, hexagonal walls, sigils glowing faintly across the ceiling, and fire burning without fuel in floating braziers. The scent of sulfur and oil choked the air. Magnus coughed once, then stopped. His eyes locked on the center of the room. A pit of golden fire. Not symbolic. Real. Liquid flame licked at the edges of the stone. Ezen's voice echoed above. This is the inferno below. The place where the first fragment hatched. He leaned over the edge. And now it waits to be fed again. Dozens of human silhouettes floated in sealed sarcophagi, suspended by gold thread veins attached to the ceiling like spiderwebs. Each one pulsed. Alive. Growing. Eva's skin went cold. They're gestating the next generation. Magnus nodded slowly. Lucian's not building soldiers. He's building seeds. He wants to scatter them. Scatter them where? She asked. And Magnus whispered. Everywhere. One of the golden sarcophagi split open, a hybrid erupted from within, fully formed, eyes already glowing, mouth stitched with metal wire. It dropped to the ground and roared, a sound that shattered bone. Eva fired, once, twice, 3 times. It absorbed the bullets. Magnus flung a glass sphere, a flash burst of powdered mercury and null dust. The creature staggered. Eva grabbed a rusted ceremonial blade from the wall and plunged it into its throat. The hybrid didn't die. But it did scream in a language neither of them understood, and the others began to twitch in their cocoons. Run, Magnus shouted. They sprinted through a collapsing tunnel, flames erupting behind them, the cries of the unborn echoing like a chorus of hunger. They burst onto the roof, coughing, burned, bruised. Eva dropped to her knees. Magnus looked out across Rome, cathedrals and rooftops bathed in dying sunlight. They're ready, he said. For what? He turned toward her. To be sent. Chapter 12, Rome begins to burn again. Location, Rome, nightfall. It started with a coughing fit. Then came the nosebleeds. Then came the laughter. In 3 different locations across Rome, a hospital ER, a political fundraiser in a luxury hotel, and a crowded subway platform, people began to collapse. Each victim displayed a strange symptom, gold flaking at the corners of the eyes. Pupils that pulsed with faint amber light. A low hum in the ears, one that never stopped. The authorities called it a chemical attack. But Eva and Magnus knew better. This wasn't a weapon. It was a signal. The container ship had docked without notice, no flag, no crew on deck, and no record in the port's log. By the time Magnus and Eva arrived, customs officers were already dead, golden veins bulging under their skin, eyes wide and empty. Eva scanned the bodies. They didn't die from exposure, she muttered. They inhaled it willingly. Magnus climbed onto the deck and broke into the ship's main hold. He found dozens of silver crates, each sealed with an alchemical mark, a twisted version of his own sigil from centuries ago. He opened one. Inside, golden vials, packaged like perfume bottles. Elegant. Perfect. Branded with a name in Latin. Eternitas. Eternity. Eva read over his shoulder. They've turned the dust into a luxury product. Worse, Magnus said. They've made it marketable. Eva had seen plenty of illegal trade operations before, guns, artifacts, even stolen organs. But this? This was beyond black market. This was sacred desecration disguised as indulgence. The secret auction was held beneath an abandoned opera house, filled with Rome's richest and most corrupt, tech moguls, aristocrats, black-budget financiers. They sat in booths drinking gold-rimmed cocktails while models in silk masks injected themselves with diluted versions of the golden dust on stage. Euphoria in a breath, the auctioneer announced. Skin that sings. Nerves that feel fire without pain. Eva, wired with a hidden mic, muttered under her breath, they're not just using the dust. They're training with it. On her private channel, Magnus' voice answered. They're building resistance, preparing to host full fragments. She moved behind the stage and found what she feared, another sarcophagus, wheeled in on a dolly, marked shipment, Berlin. Inside was a hybrid in stasis. Already formed. Already programmed. Magnus tracked a courier from the auction to a rooftop in the Trastevere district. There, he witnessed the courier remove a single, clear syringe from his case. Inside was not golden powder, but a sliver. A crystalline shard pulsing faintly. He injected it into his neck. And stood still for a moment. Then smiled. Magnus grabbed him from behind, twisted the man's arm, and slammed him into a concrete wall. The man didn't fight. He just whispered. "We are the embers. You are the forest." Then his chest ignited, from the inside. Magnus barely leapt back in time. The man exploded in a burst of golden fire, no shrapnel, no blood. Just dust. Eva returned from the auction shaken. She dropped a gold-laced syringe on Magnus' workbench. "They're already in Berlin, Paris, London. These aren't experiments anymore." "No," Magnus said. "They're seeds. They're planting them worldwide. Each one carrying the evolved strain." Eva sat, exhausted. "And what happens when they're all activated?" He looked at her. "They won't need a war. They'll just light a match." The Trevi fountain glowed under moonlight. Tourists still gathered, throwing coins. A young man in a hood stood nearby. He opened a small vial of golden powder and blew it softly into the air. The wind caught it. Carried it across the crowd. Smiles grew wider. Eyes dilated. Someone began to laugh uncontrollably. Someone else dropped to their knees and whispered, "I remember." And then the water began to boil. Chapter 13, The Emperor's Secret. Location, Rome, 64 AD. Imperial Palace, 1 week before the Great Fire. The heat of summer had become oppressive. The palace walls sweated incense and paranoia. Senators whispered. Servants vanished. And Nero, Rome's gilded god, sat on his golden throne, speaking to no one, and everything. Magnus entered the inner sanctum with hesitation. The chamber was circular, its ceiling painted to mimic the stars. Flames danced in wall sconces, but the real heat came from the cauldron in the center, a vat of molten amber, rippling with unnatural stillness. Nero stood beside it, barefoot and shirtless, his body glistening with oil, eyes fever-bright. "Do you hear it?" Nero asked without turning. Magnus swallowed. "Hear what?" "The stone, Magnus. It sings." He turned, holding a vial. Inside, a concentrated liquid, brighter than anything Magnus had ever made. A deeper shade of gold. Thicker. Alive. Magnus froze. "That's not from me." "No," Nero whispered, "it's better." He motioned to a hooded figure who emerged from the shadows, Lucian, younger then, but his eyes already wrong. Lucian held out a scroll, sealed in obsidian wax. "An alternative method," Lucian said. "More potent. Less humane." Magnus read the formula. His hands shook. "It burns the soul," he said. Lucian smiled. "That's the point. Fire is not a punishment, it's purification." Nero spread his arms. "We will become gods, Magnus. Rome will not just rule the world. We will outlive it." Magnus paced, sweat on his brow, the formula burned into his memory. He had created the Philosopher's Stone to preserve life. Not to enslave it. Not to melt it down into obedience. And now Nero had found a way to weaponize the soul. There was only one solution. He had to destroy the core. He opened a sealed case beneath his bed, inside, a small black prism. The first fragment of the true stone. He had hidden it from Nero. From Lucian. From the world. But if they ever found it, A soft knock interrupted his thoughts. Kasia stepped inside. Her face was pale. "They're calling it the breath of glory," she whispered. "Lucian is gathering prisoners to test it tomorrow. Publicly. The Colosseum. Children, Magnus." Magnus looked at her. "It ends tonight." The storm outside rattled the glass. Magnus held an old scroll in his hands, the same formula Lucian had once shown Nero. Eva sat nearby, her arms crossed, blood from her most recent fight still dried on her skin. "You knew Lucian was this dangerous even then," she said. Magnus nodded. "He was already mad. But Nero gave him a throne to speak from." Eva stood. "And the breath of glory? What was it really?" Magnus laid the scroll down. "A soul binder," he said. "It didn't just mutate the body. It fused it with memory. Pain. Identity. Every hybrid created from that strain isn't just strong, they're haunted." Eva's face tightened. "By what?" "By whoever burned first." Live stream footage exploded across the internet. A masked influencer known only as Pallidus had hijacked a fashion event in Berlin. Viewers thought it was a stunt at first. Then a man on stage injected himself with something. He screamed. Split open. And out came a figure with golden skin, elongated limbs, and a distorted human face. The audience clapped. Until he tore one in half. The screams didn't stop for 17 minutes. Eva watched the video, hands clenched. "They're not hiding anymore." "No," Magnus said quietly. "The new Rome is being born in public." Lucian stood before a mirror of polished black gold. Behind him, Ezen chanted from an ancient tongue. Kasia knelt, still alive, but bound in crimson chains made of memory thread. Lucian looked at his own reflection, then reached out. The surface rippled. And his reflection smiled back with Magnus' face. "Almost time," it said. Chapter 14, The Betrayal. Location, Paris, present day, the Belcourt Institute for Advanced Aesthetic Science. The Belcourt Institute didn't advertise its real purpose. On the surface, it was a luxurious clinic for the wealthy elite, offering anti-aging treatments, genetic editing, and soul-enhancing neurotherapy. But Magnus knew what those words really meant. Alchemy. Hidden in plain sight. Magnus and Eva arrived just before midnight, dressed as donors from the Pan-European Tech Trust. Eva wore a dark emerald gown that concealed a sidearm and a wire. Magnus wore a tailored charcoal coat, unassuming, but lined with defense sigils etched in thread. "This place smells like glass and lies," Eva muttered as they were led through the lobby by an eerily perfect concierge. Magnus didn't respond. He recognized the building. He had helped design its substructure. In 1774. The guide led them through a secure wing, closed to the public. Behind polished glass walls, patients floated in nutrient tanks. They looked asleep. But Eva noticed something wrong. None of them had pupils. Their eyes were filled with swirling gold. The guide stopped beside a tank at the far end. Inside floated a woman, mid-30s in appearance, though Eva could tell her body was centuries older. Her hair moved like seaweed. Her veins pulsed in slow, unnatural rhythm. "This," the guide said, "is our prized subject. She's been undergoing experimental treatments for over 300 years. A direct recipient of the Philosopher's seed." Magnus stepped closer to the glass. He whispered the name under his breath, Leora. Eva turned. "You know her?" "I made her. Florence, 1710. She'd been dying of the plague. A noble's daughter." Magnus had used a microscopic portion of the stone on her, wanting to see if the body could host it without pain. She had screamed for 3 days. Then stopped aging. And never slept again. Suddenly, Leora opened her eyes. They locked on Magnus. She smiled. The glass cracked. Alarms blared. Security swarmed the hallway. But it was too late. Leora burst from the tank, metal restraints snapping like twigs. Gold fire surged from her mouth as she howled. The guards opened fire. Bullets slowed her down, but didn't stop her. She moved like something caught between dancing and dying. Magnus reached for Eva, run, but before they could move, gas filled the chamber. White. Thick. Memory sweet. Eva staggered. Then everything went black. Eva awoke strapped to a chair, wrists bound with wire that hummed with low-frequency pulses. A figure leaned in. Kasia. But something was wrong. Her smile was too still. Her eyes were too bright. I didn't want it to be this way, Kasia said. But Magnus left me to die. He left us to die. Eva spat blood. You're not Kasia. Kasia tilted her head. No, she said. I'm what's left when love gets rewritten. She turned, and Lucian stepped into the room. He nodded at Eva. You're the one they all talk about. The girl with the ghost lungs. Do you know what you are? Eva glared. You're proof that alchemy can remember. That memory can pass between bodies like inheritance. He raised a vial filled with golden mist. And now we'll see if your mind survives the fire a second time. Bruised. Bleeding. Alone. Magnus crawled from a drainage shaft beneath the Institute's labs. Leora hadn't chased him. She had let him go. Which was worse? She wanted him to survive. To remember. To hurt. He collapsed on the street outside, coughing gold-laced smoke. A passerby screamed. Someone filmed it. And suddenly, the world knew his face. Chapter 15, The Bomb in the Blood. Location, unknown facility, somewhere beneath the Alps. Eva was restrained, but not in chains. Lucian was too clever for that. She sat in an elegant room furnished like a noblewoman's salon, velvet chairs, Persian rugs, flickering candlelight. The kind of setting designed to feel safe. It wasn't. She could feel it in her veins. The golden pulse. Every few minutes, it surged, heat under the skin, a subtle vibration in her bones. Like something ancient waking up inside her. Kasia sat across from her, sipping red wine from a crystal glass. The liquid glimmered unnaturally in the light. How are you feeling? She asked, voice soft. Eva didn't answer. You've been chosen, Kasia said gently. Not punished. Not broken. You were made for this. Eva glared. Don't give me prophecy. Give me facts. Lucian stepped through the curtain. She's right, you know. You're the only one we've found who can host a dormant fragment of the Philosopher's seed without immediate rejection. He held up a tablet displaying her blood work. You're a miracle, he said. But every miracle needs a purpose. His face was on every news broadcast now. Headlines scrolled across the screen. Immortal? Alchemist? Fraud? Magnus moved through Paris's sewers, bruised and bitter, the stolen clothes on his back already damp with rain and blood. He found a safe house, one of many, beneath an old perfume shop. He activated the arcane lock and entered the tiny lab hidden below. There, he ran a scan on a blood sample Eva had left behind days earlier. The screen lit up red. Alchemical fusion detected. Stability, 43%. Host integration, progressive. he swore under his breath. Lucian hadn't just exposed Eva to the dust, he had seeded her long ago. Maybe even before she met Magnus. And now, the fragment inside her was awakening. Lucian circled Eva like a sculptor admiring a half-finished statue. "We've tested over 200 subjects," he said. "None lasted more than 5 days. But you." He knelt beside her. "You haven't just survived. You've bonded." Eva fought to stay awake. Her body was on fire. Her mind was filled with flashing images. A burning temple. Kasha's scream. Gold pouring from someone's eyes. Magnus, kneeling in ash, whispering, "Forgive me." "Stop," she growled. "Get out of my head." Lucian smiled. "That's not me. That's you. That's what the stone remembers." Kasha stepped forward. "And soon, you won't remember the difference." Rome, 64 AD. The night of the Great Fire. Kasha held the obsidian blade over the altar. Lucian watched her with a sick sort of admiration. "You know what this costs?" Kasha nodded. "My name. My body. My place in the world." "But you'll live," Lucian said. "And one day, you'll remember why you came back." Kasha whispered, "To kill him." Lucian smiled. "Then let us begin." The blade cut her palm. Gold leaked from the wound. Eva collapsed onto the floor, gasping, the golden pulse now steady, like a second heartbeat. Lucian crouched beside her. "You're not dying," he whispered. "You're being reformatted." She looked up, her eyes flickering gold for the first time. And Lucian smiled like a man who had lit the fuse of a divine weapon. "Soon," he said, "you'll either save us, or burn the world with a thought." Chapter 16, The Return of Gaius. Location, southern France, a vineyard that shouldn't exist. Magnus hadn't set foot on this land in over 100 years. The hills rolled in quiet rows of violet grapes, the air thick with stillness and old power. There was no path leading here. No roads. No maps. Only memory. And guilt. At the edge of the vineyard stood a crumbling estate hidden behind willow trees, vines crawling up sun-bleached stone. In the window above, a curtain shifted. He was home. And he was watching. Gaius Romanus had once been a legionnaire. Then a guardian. Then a ghost of war and myth. Now he kept to the shadows, tending vines, speaking only to the past. A man forged in Roman fire, now wrapped in silence and bitter wine. When Magnus entered the house, Gaius didn't offer a greeting. He just poured 2 glasses, set them on the table, and said, "I warned you she'd come back." Magnus sat slowly. "I need your help." Gaius took a sip. "Too late for that." Flashback, 64 AD. Magnus and Gaius stood at the temple gates as it burned. They had just buried one of the last stone fragments beneath the altar. Kasha was dead. Or so they thought. "She was your mistake," Gaius had said. "But we'll all pay for it." Magnus left that night. And never came back. "They've taken her," Magnus said. Gaius didn't blink. "Kasha?" "No. Eva. She's bonded to a seed." That got a reaction. Gaius stood slowly, jaw clenching. "You put another soul through that curse?" "I didn't choose her. The seed did. She's going to become the second fire. Not if we get her out." A long silence. Then Gaius nodded once. "Then we do it my way." Eva sat in a white room with no corners, just smooth curves and impossible light. She didn't know how long it had been. Hours? Days? Her mind was no longer hers alone. Voices whispered inside her. Images flickered across her vision like static. A sword buried in volcanic sand. A woman's hand gripping an obsidian dagger. Magnus screaming as gold bled from his mouth. And then, Kasha's voice. Soft. Sorrowful. Unbearable. We all come back, Eva. But not all of us survive ourselves. A sudden door appeared in the wall. Lucian stepped through, smiling. You're stabilizing faster than we predicted. Eva looked up. Her pupils flickered, one normal, one gold. I'm not stable, she said. I'm splitting. Lucian crouched beside her. No. You're integrating. You're becoming what the world needs next. He held out his hand. Come. It's time to see what you can do. Magnus stared at the weapons on the wall. Swords from fallen empires. Dusty scrolls containing banned formulas. A vial of blood sealed in ancient glass. This is your backup plan? He asked. Gaius tossed him a satchel of relics. No. This is my insurance policy in case you fail again. Magnus hesitated. Do you still hate me? Gaius stared at him. Only when I remember Rome. In a hidden chamber, cameras rolled. Lucian stood behind Eva, now dressed in ceremonial white robes, her hair braided in golden thread. To the world, he declared, we present the first of the awakened. Eva looked straight into the lens. Her mouth opened. And she said, I am the voice of the flame. And I remember everything. Chapter 17, The Fireborn. Location, Geneva, the Global Human Advancement Summit, GHS, 9:06 p.m. The hall was filled with cameras, dignitaries, and hungry eyes. The summit had been hijacked, its original speakers replaced by emergency keynote guests brought in under the veil of philanthropy and technological evolution. Lucian stepped on stage beneath a minimalist banner. The future is Human 2.0. But what came next had nothing to do with science. Ladies and gentlemen, he announced, tonight you will witness something no generation has seen since the burning of Rome. A miracle. The crowd leaned forward. And a new name for what we are becoming. The spotlight shifted. Eva stepped onto the stage. Dressed in white. Eyes glowing faintly. Calm. Composed. Not herself. Magnus watched from a darkened maintenance tunnel beneath the stage, flanked by Gaius and two mercenaries he'd sworn never to work with again. She's lit, Gaius said. Look at her eyes. She's carrying the charge. I know, Magnus said quietly. But I don't know who she's carrying anymore. Lucian wheeled out a stretcher. A man in his 50s, billionaire, tech magnate, and well-known philanthropist, lay unconscious, his body riddled with metastatic tumors. He had less than a week to live. Lucian addressed the crowd. With the help of the Eternitas protocol, he said, we will bring him back. He turned to Eva. She hesitated. For a moment, just a flicker, her hand trembled. Then she laid her fingers on the man's forehead. The moment her skin touched his, a pulse of golden light surged across his body. The air shimmered. The crowd gasped. And then, he woke. Eyes wide. Breath deep. He stood. Fully healed. The room exploded in applause. People wept. Cameras zoomed in on Eva's serene expression. But Magnus was already moving. Gaius took out the comms guard in silence, and Magnus hacked the broadcast signal to intercept surveillance from the stage. And that's when they saw it. The man who had been healed was still standing. Still smiling. But something in his face had changed. He turned toward a nearby assistant. Grabbed her. and whispered something into her mouth. Not her ear. Her mouth. A thread of golden mist passed between them. She screamed and collapsed. The man convulsed, his eyes turned gold. Then black. Then fire erupted from his chest. Not combustion. Not chemical. But pure, alchemical ignition, a core meltdown of soul and memory. Security panicked. The crowd scattered. And Lucian simply smiled, even as flames licked across the banners. Behold, he whispered, the first fire born. Eva stumbled back, gasping. I didn't mean to, she whispered. Lucian approached calmly. You didn't heal him, Eva. You activated him. She looked at her hands, horrified. You said he was sick. He was, Lucian said, with time. You cured that. And the flame did the rest. Eva's voice cracked. I felt him die. No, Lucian corrected, gently. You felt him evolve. Magnus saw Eva begin to panic, her aura flaring with gold. We have to get her out now. She'll ignite half the room if you touch her now, Gaius warned. We need to contain the charge. Magnus pulled a vial from his coat, one drop of pure null dust in a pressurized ampoule. He nodded grimly. Then I contain her. Or we both burn. Eva ran through backstage corridors, vision flickering. She could hear the thoughts of the fireborn echoing in her mind. There is no death. Only memory, passed like flame. Suddenly, Magnus grabbed her. She screamed. He jabbed the ampoule into her arm, light detonated between them. For a moment, her body convulsed. Then, calm. She fell into his arms, eyes wide with recognition. Magnus, she whispered, I remember her. He held her tighter. Kasha? Eva nodded slowly. But she's not alone in here.
Across every empire, every forgotten age, stories still whisper. If this tale stirred your spirit, leave a like to honor the echoes of the past. Share your thoughts in the comments. Every voice weaves a new legend into the sands of time. And subscribe to our YouTube channel Historical Fantasy Stories, where myths walk beside history, and every discovery changes the world. The next forgotten legend is waiting to be found.